Hello my dear students, here is Computer Wunsam. For everyone in Dungeons & Dragons, the adventure begins at some point. No matter how you are getting into the world of D&D, it still starts out very overwhelming, especially when you are mastering the game. How does the guiding work? How can we avoid the mistakes that make the game go wrong? And how can we ensure that you as a DM and all of the players have fun in playing the game Dungeons & Dragons? These are some questions we are talking about today, because here are 10 DM tips to get you started as a newbie Dungeon Master. The first tip seems a little bit obvious. Start with some books. Most of Dungeons & Dragons is based on the different books. These books can range from a basic rule book to a fully fledged campaign where you just have to follow the steps which are written in there. You can use in fact an adventure book or even some online materials for your first adventure, but I incline you to use some materials like the starter sets to start your own campaigning. If you feel very creative, one of the first most important books are the so-called Player's Handbook. Player's Handbook is the guide on how to create a character, how to make the characters awesome, and it even consists of some enemies you can fight in there. It is a good book for learning the basics about Dungeons & Dragons, and it is amazing if you want to improve on your own characters and on the characters of the rest of the group of friends you have. Another book which is quite good for starters is especially for the Dungeon Master, the so-called Dungeon Master's Guide. It consists of some examples on how to direct your adventure, what type of adventure you want, and how to lead as a good DM. It also consists of some things to flesh out your whole world, like magic items, gods and deities, and something more you can use for your own leisure. The last book of the big three is the so-called Monster Manual. Like the title says, the Monster Manual is a collection, an encyclopedia of hundreds and hundreds of monsters which you can use for your own campaigns. Some of the monsters in the Player's Handbook are even in there, and you can use even much more fleshed out monsters like vampires, dragons, beasts and other creatures to fill your campaign with. These books are a good start for the beginning. And if you even have all of the three first ones, the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide, you have all the materials to start your own adventure with. This also leads me to the second tip, which seems a little bit paradox, but starting your first adventure is the best when you have simple structures instead of very complicated stories. In my experience, when I used all of these books, I had a 30-page campaign prepared for my first time DMing. However, the problem was that the campaign derailed already in the beginning of the first 2 pages because the party has planned otherwise than I have planned it. You have to make sure that you don't plan too much. Now there's a difference between preparing and planning. In planning you assume that the path the party is going is exactly this path, while in preparing you are just making sure that you have for any possible encounter something. Keep the plan simple, because you cannot assume every single case the party has prepared for you. That doesn't mean that you ignore everything you encounter though. Imagine your story having a little thread the party has to follow. They can go their own ways, change their paths, and so on and so forth. Make it so the party has enough to work with on the one hand, but not too much, or else they would feel overwhelmed. In German we call this the red thread. You need to make sure that the party has something to follow, has something to go. It can be anything you want. It can be a simple quest like save the little goblin who has been captured, or save us from the city hunted by this bandit captain. You don't need much more to make a compelling story. It is just as simple as that. As soon as you have made some experience, you can make some more interesting stories. Start with the simple high fantasy adventure, like in Lord of the Rings, where there is a good guy and an evil guy, and we have to hunt down the evil guy to save something. After this you can go into some more interesting parts like horror, crime, or maybe something more emotional. A final tip for the wet thread is the fact that the battle encounters exist. Battle encounters have the big advantage that they are filled with the most rules. So even if you don't know how to handle some rules, battle encounters are there very friendly because they are using the turns and the agency is in this case at the players. By using these battle encounters for the beginners at least, you are giving them the feeling that they do something epic too. This brings me to the next point. The world of D&D consists of 3 gigantic parts: combat, social and exploration encounters. Like I said before, combat encounters are some of the most important encounters here. You can try them out. However, if you learn a little bit more about D&D, exploration is a good part to make sure that the party keeps invested. They want to find out what the gigantic treasure is, or what this big evil thing is what destroys the country. Or maybe they just want to see the world and want to see what they can do with it. The social part is also an amazing part in D&D because it makes sure that you have compelling characters with their own set of skills, flaws and problems, and the party feels more invested if they have some social cues they can work with. For instance, if one of your player characters plays a paladin who has lost their family in a fire, you can play one of the NPCs as a butler who tries to re-establish the family's values. Or maybe there is a fighter who has lost a tournament, a jousting tournament for instance, and now tries to improve himself to defeat this guy who has defeated him beforehand. Never forget the social parts in D&D, they can be so impactful. Tip number 5 are the rules. You don't need to know every single rule by heart. This is something I want to make sure that every DM knows. If you don't know a rule, you can look for the book or you can improvise these rules, and if you have improvised these rules and you are wrong, then you just tell it to your party. Dungeons & Dragons doesn't live by the rules in itself. Sure, some people think that the rules are the most important thing in the world. But on the other hand, it is more about fun, it is more about understanding what rules to use for your own adventure, because some of them are great, others are garbage. If you want to try out a rule you don't know so much about, you always can ask the internet. And if you think that some rules are weird, then you don't have to have them. As a DM you can choose which rules you want to have and which rules you don't want to have at the table. This all defines your own playstyle. And incorporating what and what not is also important for the next part. Tip number 6 is about improvisation. Improvising is one of the most amazing skills you can have in Dungeons & Dragons. And Dungeons & Dragons is great because it needs you as a DM to create so many things on the fly. As an example in the planning for tip 2, there was once this demon-held fortress which has been formerly led by some goblins. The goblins in fact were friendly, by the way, and the party needed to defeat the evil overlord which has led the fortress. My idea was that the party enters via the sewers by finding them with the help of some goblins. However, the goblins also have attacked via using some catapults and some of their fighters. And what the party did was quite surprising. They went to the catapult, jumped on it, let themselves being fired off it, and then flew over the castle's walls, landing directly in the marketplace. I needed to improvise the whole encounter more or less, like the demons being alarmed and the goblins which are still in the fortress trying to save this group from the rest of the demons. I gave some of the party members a little bit of a bonus by not fighting the evil enemies in the sewers, and gave them also a little bit of treasure in the D&D campaign, because in fact I was totally baffled of this problem solving skill. This also meant that my script was absolutely useless in this moment. This means I needed to throw off my script, I needed to get away from it, and I needed to be ready to improvise. Like I said, my planning went overboard. However, I was prepared for this case because I used a goblin woman which was imprisoned in there, and one of the party members just flew on the cages of this goblin woman, and the goblin woman was very thankful for this. Don't imagine D&D as a movie script. Imagine it more like an improvisation script with a beginning, a middle part and the end. And the party can now more or less choose what middle part they are going to use. This is about D&D, and this is about creating this adventure for themselves. And in fact, always if you improvise, there's also the possibility of making some errors. And this is also something I want to talk about, which is very important for myself and very important for any other player I've encountered, because mistakes happen. Sometimes you can let them happen. Sometimes they are just bad, and sometimes you're just unlucky in this case. Mistakes can range from a character who dies because you have calculated the encounter wrongly, or maybe just forgot a detail, forgot the name, or maybe even if you have written the wrong accent or used the wrong accent. All of these things can happen, and this is something you have to make sure that it's okay, because like in real life, every time you make a mistake, you can improve on it, if you really want to, naturally. The next tip, the 9th tip, goes in the similar direction. As a dungeon master, don't try to compare yourself with the pros, which already have played for 20, 30, 40 years, or which have these famous channels like the one of Matt Mercer or Dimension 20. Your party is as good as it is. You definitely can take some inspiration from these games. For instance, if they have created the most beautiful characters in the world, or maybe a trap you can use in your own dungeons. But do not orient yourself on Critical Role or something like that. They are amazing in their own way, but they are not your campaign. Your campaign is about your story, the story you are telling to your players, and the story you build with your players. Your story is your identity. And in this case, you also give this possibility to the players. Make your own thing, because this is the best thing you can do, and you don't need to make something more than you have to be for yourself. Because Dungeons & Dragons in the end is about having fun. This is the final tip I will give to you. If you want to play D&D, it isn't about making the most beautiful adventure, making the most chaotic things in the world. It is all about having fun with your friends, having fun with the people you have met, and having fun with your own creation, your own character. You grow on it as your character, you all will get better for the adventure, and you all will create something amazing out of it. Nothing in D&D needs to be totally perfect. Sometimes it's even funnier if something is totally chaotic or it goes wrong. This is the charm of D&D. You can make the most amazing things by embracing your failures, and all of these funny moments you can make with your team, with your friends, and with the guys you're hanging out with. Dungeons & Dragons is a cooperative game, and if you can cooperate with each other, no matter if you're playing or just doing some things together, then you already have won. With this I finish all of my 10 D&D tips. I'm glad that you have been here, and I can't wait to see what beautiful D&D campaigns are you going to create. Your Computer Wunsan.